Call me immediately. No greeting. No context. Just those 3 words glowing cold on my screen as I reached for my coat. My daughter, Claire, had invited me to dinner that evening. Just the 2 of us. Mom, we need to talk. I thought she missed me. I thought I was finally being included again. Instead, I sat down on the hallway bench, the phone trembling in my hand, and called Richard, my lawyer. He answered on the first ring. She filed a petition this morning, he said. No hesitation. Claire wants legal control. She's claiming you're mentally incompetent. The coat slipped from my hands. My own daughter, the one I had sacrificed everything for, was quietly trying to erase me. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Stories like this deserve to be heard, because sometimes the deepest cuts don't come from strangers. They come from the people you once called family. I sat there, the silence pressing heavy, and thought about how we had reached this point. Claire wasn't always cold. There was a time when she used to take notes in meetings, asking questions, eager to learn. I remember her little hands gripping a lemon tart from the bakery near her elementary school, the powdered sugar coating her smile as she bragged about winning the spelling bee. Those memories once stitched hope into me, like patches on torn fabric. But somewhere along the way, the stitches unraveled. In the last year, Claire had grown sharper, crueler. At board meetings, she interrupted me, finishing my sentences as if I couldn't keep up. She rolled her eyes when I asked about projections. She told staff, "Mom is overthinking again." At first, I laughed it off, desperate to believe she was just being ambitious. But ambition has teeth, and I ignored the bite marks until it was too late. That phone call from Richard wasn't just news. It was confirmation of what I had refused to see. Claire had been preparing for this. She invited me to dinner, not to reconcile, but to distract me, to lure me into a trap, while papers with my name, printed in bold, already sat in a courthouse file. I stood in my kitchen that night, untouched tea cooling in my hands, staring at the lemon tarts I had bought on my way to her house. I thought they would sweeten our conversation. Instead, they mocked me. They weren't meant for me. They were part of her performance. And as I set them down on the counter, I realized the truth. My daughter didn't want to share a future with me. She wanted a future without me. The night after Richard's call, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a reminder of how alone I was, how the walls that had witnessed my victories now echoed with my daughter's betrayal. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the lemon tarts untouched, their sugar crust collapsing under the weight of time, just like my illusions about Claire. The next morning, I forced myself to drive to the office. It was my company, my creation, my legacy. Yet when I walked through the glass doors, I felt like an intruder. Whispers fluttered through the lobby like moths around a dying flame. My assistant's smile was tight, nervous, and when I asked for the latest projections, she hesitated, her eyes darting toward Claire's office before answering. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Claire sat at the head of the table, my seat, her hands folded neatly on a stack of documents. She glanced up at me with a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said sweetly, but there was steel underneath. "You didn't need to come in today. We've got it handled." I stood frozen for a beat too long, scanning the faces of the executives around the table. Some avoided my gaze. Others stared down at their notes, embarrassed. A few, the ones I had mentored for years, gave me apologetic looks but said nothing. Silence is louder than betrayal. It roars with complicity. I sat anyway, refusing to yield. For an hour, Claire guided the meeting as though I were a guest. She presented slides I hadn't approved, dismissed my questions with patronizing explanations, and wrapped the session with, "Thank you all. Let's make sure we keep communication clear so no one gets confused." The word hung in the air like poison. Confused. That's how she was framing me. Not sharp, not decisive. Confused. When the room emptied, I stayed behind, my hand resting on the polished oak table I had chosen decades ago. Once, this table had been the altar of my determination, where deals were struck and futures secured. Now, it felt like a stage where my daughter rehearsed my replacement. I left without saying a word. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, biting against my skin. The world kept moving, cars, conversations, laughter, while my own reality fractured. Claire was tightening her grip, weaving a narrative that painted me as obsolete. And the staff? They were too afraid to challenge her. That night, alone in my kitchen, I realized something chilling. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives with polite smiles, subtle dismissals, and a petition signed quietly in the shadows. And if I didn't act soon, Claire wouldn't just erase me from the company. She would erase me from my own life. The days that followed blurred into one another, each one punctured by small humiliations that cut deeper than a single blow. Claire was subtle at first. She began introducing me at meetings not as the founder and CEO, but as our respected advisor. The title slid from her lips like honey, but it tasted like venom. Advisor meant irrelevant. Advisor meant ornamental. At lunch with the senior team, I noticed the seating arrangement had shifted. Claire sat at the center of the long table, laughter orbiting around her. My seat, the one that once commanded the room, had been pushed to the far end near the interns. I ate in silence, the clink of my fork louder than the shallow conversation that excluded me entirely. One evening, I stopped by the office unannounced. I wanted to catch up on quarterly reports. But when I entered the conference room, I found Claire already there, surrounded by 3 executives, whispering over a presentation. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Claire didn't miss a beat. "Mom, it's late," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "You should rest. We'll handle this." I stood in the doorway, watching as the executives shuffled their papers, eyes glued to the floor. No one spoke. No one invited me to stay. For the first time in decades, I walked away from a meeting in my own company like an outsider who didn't belong. It was at home, however, that the humiliation felt sharpest. Claire called one evening, her voice syrupy with feigned concern. "Mom, I've noticed you've been forgetting things lately. Maybe it's time you took longer vacations. People are starting to get confused." The word again. Confused. She was planting it everywhere at the office, with the staff, even in casual phone calls. And I let her. I let her because a small part of me, the part that still remembered her as a girl with powdered sugar on her cheeks, couldn't believe she would actually try to destroy me. But the evidence was mounting. A junior accountant confided quietly that Claire had been joking about my early retirement during drinks with colleagues. "Don't worry," she'd said. "We'll take good care of her once she steps aside." They laughed. Even my allies laughed. Humiliation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet erosion of respect, the whispered jokes that travel faster than truth. By the end of that week, I realized Claire wasn't just testing boundaries. She was building a case. And if I didn't stop her, she would succeed in convincing the world that I was no longer fit to lead. Maybe no longer fit to live my life at all. 3 mornings later, I found myself sitting in Richard's office, the same brick building on Main Street, where he'd practiced law for 2 decades. The blinds were half closed, the smell of strong coffee thick in the air. Richard didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. Petition for adult conservatorship, he said flatly. My name sat in bold at the top. Claire's signature scrawled across the bottom like a knife wound. I stared at the document, my throat tight. She's serious. She's ambitious, Richard corrected, leaning back in his chair. But ambition without discipline is reckless. She's underestimated you. I wanted to laugh, but no sound came out. She's already winning. The board sees me as fragile. The staff whispers. Even at home, I feel like a ghost in my own kitchen. Richard tapped the folder with one thick finger. That's narrative, not fact. And narratives can be broken. What she doesn't realize is that numbers, records, and paper trails don't lie. He opened his legal pad, scribbling notes as he spoke. Here's how we fight. Step 1. Contest immediately. Step 2. Bring hard proof. Not tears, not speeches. Data. Medical evaluations. Financial records. Client testimonials. Anything that proves you are fit, competent, and still leading. I sat back, stunned by his clarity. For weeks, I had been drowning in humiliation, letting Claire define me with whispers. Now, for the first time, I saw a way forward. Richard's gaze softened. You built that company through 3 recessions, 5 mergers, and a pandemic. If she thinks she can erase you with a petition, she's the one who's confused. That word again, confused. But this time it didn't sting. It lit a fire. I have everything, I whispered. 30 years of records, signed contracts, annual audits, even my journals. Good, Richard said. We'll use them all. She wants a quiet coup. We'll give her a public reckoning. I left his office with the folder under my arm, the autumn air sharper than before. For the first time since the betrayal, my steps felt steady. Claire had thrown down the gauntlet, but she had no idea I had been preparing for battles like this my whole life. That night, I cleared the dining room table and spread out binders, receipts, and reports. Page after page of evidence that I was not obsolete, not sentimental, not slipping. The war room was born. And as I stacked the first binder, I whispered to myself, You wanted a war, Claire. Now you'll have one. The dining room had transformed into a battlefield. Charts lined the walls, binders stacked like fortifications, and flash drives labeled in my own handwriting glimmered under the lamp. I worked late into the night, the steady hum of the refrigerator my only companion. By dawn, exhaustion weighed on me, but so did something sharper resolve. It was in this haze of paperwork and fury that the unexpected happened. On Thursday afternoon, as I left the elevator at the office, a quiet voice stopped me. Mrs. Walker, someone whispered. I turned. Mason, the junior accountant, stood awkwardly in the corridor, his tie slightly askew, his eyes darting left and right, as if he were smuggling state secrets. He was barely out of graduate school, polite to a fault, the kind of employee Claire barely noticed unless she needed coffee or copies. Yes? I asked, lowering my voice instinctively. He swallowed, then extended a folded sheet of paper toward me. I think you should see this. Before I could respond, he glanced toward the stairwell, nodded once, and disappeared down the steps, as if he'd never been there. I unfolded the page with trembling hands. It was an internal email, Claire's email, dated 2 weeks earlier. The subject line froze me in place. Pre-transition support. The body was worse. When the time comes, I expect full alignment. Bonuses will be distributed accordingly once I assume interim control. Not if, when. The words hit like a hammer. Claire wasn't hedging. She wasn't hoping. She was certain. Certain enough to promise financial rewards to 6 staff members, including 3 department heads. She was buying loyalty with company money, securing her throne before the coup even began. I scanned the signatures at the bottom. Names I had trusted for years. Names I had invited into my home for holidays and celebrations. And now, names tethered to betrayal. I slipped the paper into my folder and walked to my office. My heart pounding. Rage simmered under my skin, but alongside it came something else. Precision. This was more than whispers. This was proof. And proof, as Richard had said, was a weapon. That evening, I scanned the document and emailed it to Richard with a short note. She's not just undermining me. She's bribing them. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. It wasn't joy. It was clarity. Claire believed she was orchestrating a flawless takeover, but what she didn't realize was that cracks were forming in her empire, and one quiet young accountant had just handed me the first thread to unravel it all. By the end of that week, my home no longer resembled a place of comfort. It had become a fortress. The dining room table sagged under the weight of binders, receipts, and ledgers. My living room floor was littered with flash drives, sticky notes, and sharpened pencils lined like ammunition. I had spent my life preparing budgets, mergers, and crisis plans. Now I was preparing for war this time, not with the market or competitors, but with my own daughter. Each night I sat beneath the yellow light of a single lamp, the house otherwise dark, the silence punctuated only by the rustle of paper. I combed through every ledger and report with the precision of a surgeon. 30 years of records had trained me for this moment. Claire thought age had dulled me. What she didn't understand was that age had honed me into someone who never overlooked a detail. At first, everything looked ordinary. Quarterly summaries, administrative costs, vendor payments. But then my eye caught a line item: strategic advisory, $12,000. No invoice attached. No supporting report. Just a vague description buried under general expenses. I flipped forward. Marketing consultant, $8,500. Again, no notes, no deliverables. Just money drained, quiet, and consistent. Month after month, small enough to slip by most eyes, but large enough to form a pattern. I took out a separate notebook and began charting the amounts. My pen scratched across the page as the timeline emerged. And then the truth hit me with brutal clarity. The payments aligned perfectly with the dates of Claire's petition filings. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had financed her betrayal with the very company I built. One payment led to another discovery. A consulting firm incorporated 3 months ago. Its sole officer listed as an old classmate of Claire's. Another payment, routed to a legal advisory group, that upon closer inspection, turned out to be the firm currently representing her in the conservatorship case. She was using my company's profits to destroy me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the columns of figures. The betrayal was grotesque in its simplicity. She wanted me erased, and she expected me to fund the erasure. The following morning, I marched into Richard's office, the leather folder heavy in my hands. He spread the documents across his desk, his sharp eyes scanning every page. "She's reckless," he murmured, "and sloppy. This isn't just betrayal, it's fraud. When we present this, her case collapses." His words steadied me. For weeks, Claire had defined me with rumors. Fragile, confused, obsolete. But rumors can't survive against records. And records were my language. As I left his office, the crisp autumn air filled my lungs. It didn't sting anymore. It cleared me. The war room wasn't just working. It was winning. And Claire had no idea that each forged invoice and misused dollar was another brick in the wall closing in on her. The morning after I handed Richard the evidence, I returned to the office earlier than usual. The war room at home had given me focus, but here inside these walls I had built brick by brick. The battle would play out. My office still smelled faintly of leather and oak polish, the same scent that had accompanied every major decision of my career. I had barely settled behind my desk when the door opened without a knock. Claire walked in as though she owned the air I breathed. No hesitation, no courtesy. Just entitlement dressed in cream silk. "Mom," she said smoothly, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." I didn't rise. I didn't offer a smile. Instead, I closed the binder in front of me with deliberate calm. "About what? The petition you filed? Or the money you stole from the company to fund it?" For the briefest flicker, her expression cracked. But she recovered quickly, slipping into that politician's smile I knew too well. "I think you're misinformed. Those expenses were necessary consulting fees." "Consulting fees," I repeated flatly. "Funny how they all lead back to your lawyer's office." Her jaw tightened. She moved closer, lowering her voice as if to soften the blow. "You've worked so hard, Mom. Nobody denies that. But lately, people are concerned. You forget things. You contradict yourself in meetings. You get emotional. I'm just trying to protect you and the company from decline." I nodded. I studied her face, every carefully rehearsed line, every feigned expression of concern. She had practiced this speech, no doubt in front of a mirror, maybe even in front of her co-conspirators. "You're not protecting me," I said, my voice steady. "You're protecting your ambition." Her eyes narrowed. "You're tired. You're slipping. People are already talking. You can't win this fight." I rose then, deliberately slow, until we stood eye to eye across my desk. "Let them talk. I have the receipts. Every single one. And when the time comes, the only one exposed will be you." For the first time, I saw uncertainty ripple through her composure. She shifted her weight, her confidence faltering for just a second. Then, like a mask sliding back into place, she smirked. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret dragging our family through the mud." I leaned forward, voice low and sharp as a blade. "You did that the moment you signed your name on that petition." Ah. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then she turned, snatched her bag from the chair, and swept toward the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. "Think about your legacy," she said softly. "Step aside, while you can still do it gracefully." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The binders stacked on my desk spoke louder than words. When she left, I sat again, opened a fresh folder, and labeled it in bold ink. "Claire. Misconduct." This wasn't family anymore. This was war. And she had just walked into the wrong battlefield. The invitation arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. A handwritten card, cream paper, Claire's flawless cursive across the front. "Dinner? Just the two of us. Let's talk." I almost laughed. She still thought she could script this like a performance. First, the ambush petition, then the stolen funds, now the pretense of reconciliation. Every move rehearsed, every word chosen for effect. Richard advised me not to go. "She'll use it to spin the narrative," he warned. "Make you look unreasonable if you refuse." So I agreed. But not as a mother hoping for peace. As an opponent, stepping onto enemy ground. The restaurant was one Claire favored for board dinners. Dim lighting, polished silverware, staff trained to make guests feel important. She was already seated when I arrived, draped in cream silk, her hair in a perfect chignon. She rose, as though she'd been waiting, with open arms. "Mom," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look wonderful." I sat, unflinching. "Save it." Why are we here? She exhaled like a martyr carrying a burden. Because I don't want this to divide us. We're family. We should be working together. I stirred the water glass in front of me, watching the ice clink against crystal. Family doesn't file petitions in secret. Her smile tightened. I had to, before things got worse. People are concerned. Investors want stability. If we present a united front, we can transition gracefully. Okay. Transition, I repeated. You mean replace me? Claire leaned forward, voice lower, softer. Think of your legacy, Mom. Step aside now, and history will remember you fondly. Drag this into court, and you'll look desperate, confused. That word again, sharp as a knife. But this time it didn't cut me. It fueled me. I let the silence stretch, long enough for her to shift uncomfortably. The waiter arrived with menus, and she smiled up at him, like nothing was wrong. When he left, I leaned in, my tone ice cold. You want me gone so badly you're bribing staff with bonuses. You think I don't know? For the briefest second, her mask slipped. Then she recovered, shaking her head. Rumors. Don't fall for gossip. I didn't argue. I simply placed my napkin on the table and stood. Enjoy your dinner. Her voice followed me out of the restaurant, smooth but trembling at the edges. You'll regret this, Mom. Number, I thought, stepping into the night air. The regret would be hers. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and cold air, a theater of truth, where lies came to die. I wore black, not for mourning, but for focus. Claire arrived in cream, soft and calculated, as though innocence could be woven into fabric. Her lawyer rose first, his voice dripping with concern. This case is not about animosity, he began, gesturing toward Claire with practiced warmth. It's about compassion. My client, Miss Claire Walker, fears her mother's declining judgment endangers the future of the company. She seeks only to protect what her mother built. Compassion. Protect. Words sharpened into weapons, aimed at my dignity. Then Claire took the stand. Her eyes shimmered with rehearsed tears. I love my mother, she said softly, but she's not the same. She forgets things. She cries in meetings. She makes decisions based on emotion, not strategy. She paused, turning toward the gallery. This has been the hardest choice of my life. For a moment, I saw heads nodding. The narrative was working. Then Richard stood. No theatrics, just precision. He carried 3 binders, black leather, gold embossed. One by one, he laid them on the judge's bench. Exhibit A, he said calmly. Medical evaluations from 2 specialists within the last 18 months. Both clear. No cognitive decline. Oat. The judge flipped through the reports. Silence. Exhibit B, Richard continued. Financial and operational records under Mrs. Walker's leadership. 3 consecutive years of revenue growth, industry-leading client retention, and market expansion. He opened the binder, graphs and data gleaming under courtroom lights. The silence thickened. And finally, Exhibit C. Richard's tone cut sharper now. Evidence that the petitioner, Miss Claire Walker, used company funds to finance this very case. Legal services disguised as consulting fees, bonuses promised to staff in exchange for loyalty, and personal compensation increases under fabricated titles. He slid forward the last binder. Pages of invoices, bank transfers, and emails stared back at the room. The judge's brow furrowed. Claire's lawyer stammered an objection, overruled immediately. Richard projected one email onto the screen. Once I assume control, bonuses will be distributed for your discretion. The gallery shifted. Board members crossed arms. whispers rippling like cracks through glass. Claire's face paled. The judge turned to her, voice cold. You accuse your mother of incompetence while using her company's money to strip her of power. Explain. For the first time, Claire had no script. Her lips parted, but no words came. I sat motionless, hands folded, watching the mask crumble. The performance was over, and the truth documented, undeniable, was the only actor left standing. When the judge dismissed Claire's petition, the sound was quiet, almost anticlimactic. No gavel slammed, no shouting. Just words, sliding into the air with finality. This petition lacks merit. The evidence presented by the respondent is clear, verified, and in direct contradiction to the claims of the petitioner. Further, there is sufficient basis to open a formal review into misplaces. Claire Walker's financial conduct. The room shifted. Board members who had once whispered about my decline now leaned forward, their eyes no longer filled with doubt but with recognition. Richard closed the final binder with the calm certainty of a man who knew the battle was won. Claire sat stiff in her chair, shoulders caving inward, the cream of her dress no longer glowing but drained. I didn't smile. Victory doesn't always feel sweet. Sometimes it feels like silence after a storm, heavy and necessary. By evening, I returned home to the quiet of my kitchen. The house was still, the war room dismantled, the binders locked away, and there, on the counter, sat the box of lemon tarts I had bought weeks ago, the ones meant for Claire. Their crusts had collapsed, the filling dull with age, a relic of a night I once believed might bring reconciliation. I picked one up, turning it over in my hand. Once it had symbolized hope, a patch on torn fabric, a fragile attempt to stitch mother and daughter back together. Now it was something else entirely, proof that I had walked willingly into a trap, blind to the sharpened smile waiting for me. Proof that love, when twisted by greed, can rot faster than fruit left out in the sun. I set the tart back in the box and closed the lid. It was no longer a gift for her. It was a reminder for me. 2 weeks later, the board called a meeting. I walked into the room at 9 a.m. Sharp. Every seat filled, every eye fixed on me. They stood when I entered, not out of pity, but out of respect. I sat at the head of the table. No apology in my posture, no hesitation in my tone. This company, I said, was not built on charm or youth or false concern. It was built on discipline, strategy, and relentless truth. And from this day forward, anyone, family or not, who tries to undermine that will face the consequences. No one moved, no one whispered. The silence was reverence this time, not doubt. Afterward, as I walked down the hall, I passed Claire's former office. Empty, stripped clean. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The lemon tart was the same. But I wasn't. This time, I was the one closing the door. So that's the truth of how betrayal almost destroyed everything, until silence and strength turned the story around. But there's one thing I didn't tell you at the start. What if the betrayal wasn't just about money, but about love, power, and a secret no one expected? Click on this video here if you want to hear the next story of family, betrayal, and revenge. I'll see you in the next one.